Welcome back to 2K Away. Okay, I'm Paige. This is my sister Peyton. We talk about true crime and weird things. And if you didn't listen to the last episode, this is part 2 of the Oakland County child killer. Again, this is very, very heavy and not a very fun topic. However, I think it needs to be talked about because it's still an open investigation.
Yes. And if you're going to listen to it, go ahead, hug your child now, hug your pets, give them kisses.
Yep.
And then get them out of the room because they don't need to hear this.
Nope.
And I'm including the pets in that as well.
Right. Yeah. So sorry that last week was a huge downer. It's not really going to be any better this week. Sorry if we made you cry. Because I did.
Because we did.
Yeah, sure did. So, not going to get any better this week. But this will be just part 2. We're not going any further. So.
Yeah, getting this done in 2 parts.
2 parts.
So I can't do another. I can't do a third.
No. So we're going to get into it. So if you thought last episode was heavy, yeah, I'm going even deeper into some really bad shit. And I'm going to talk about some awful humans. So again, to be forewarned, trigger warning, this isn't a light episode. Again, we're talking and continuing the child pornography type thing. We will still be talking about children's death, particularly the 4 that were killed that I talked about in the last episode.
Yes.
So understandable if you need to skip this. We won't hold it against you. We love all of you.
Yes. We understand that this is really, some people just don't want to listen to us don't want to listen to this kind of episode. So if you want something a little like goofier, go to like the Whaley House or
right. Or
one of our other episodes.
Our spooky houses. So
yeah, that one.
So last week I ended part 1 when they had found little Timmy King on March 22nd, 1977.
Which was rough.
Very rough.
My God.
Yep. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about Chris Busch and Gregory Greene. So in the last episode, I talked about how Greene and Busch were friends who actually worked together to lure in the young boys and molest them. So while Greene didn't actually have a noteworthy background, Busch was the son of a very powerful and wealthy man in the GM business. So this is the money that was used to bail Busch out of jail just before Tim King was abducted and then killed. So
it's so weird that sometimes the universe brings 2 people like this together.
I know.
It's like what is happening?
Yep. Ugh. And they weren't the only ones though that were involved in this type of thing. Though I'll be talking about them, trust me.
I know.
So after Timmy was found, the task force was again very desperate to find the killer. So they wanted to prevent any more deaths. So after Tim's death, Greene and Busch were sentenced for their crimes of sexual misconduct on children. Greene was actually sentenced to life in prison, but like I said before, Busch just got probation and a fine that was clearly easy to pay since his family was fully loaded.
Wait, so Greene got life in prison for this?
Greene got life in prison, but Greene also had a background, which is this background that was similar.
Recorded.
Yes, it was similar to what he was, being sentenced for this time. He had a lot of that type of background, so that's why he was sentenced to life in prison. Like I said before, Busch just got probation and a fine. That was easy for him to pay because he's loaded. But from here on out, he was officially labeled as a child molester. Greene and Busch were still, yes. Do you have a question?
I was getting ready to, because I was getting ready to ask if he was maybe put on like the sex offender registry, but I don't think that was a
Yes.
thing then.
Well, I don't know if it was or not. I didn't say anything, but he was officially labeled as that in
Yeah,
any public.
because I know certain states have different rules and everything, and I know especially during this time, this kind of like this sexual misconduct and sexual assault just wasn't taken quite as seriously as it is today anyway.
Yeah, so I
So
don't
I
know if
was
there was a registry or anything at this point in time that he had to register on, but I mean, from here on out, that's the police were able, in any time that they saw him or whatever, he was labeled as a sexual predator. So
good. Good.
Greene and Busch, both, they were still on the police's radar as possible suspects for the one who killed the 4 kids. They were questioned quite a few times. Um, and I mean, Greene was in prison at this point in time. Well, getting ready to go into prison and in prison while they were questioning him.
Yeah.
And then, if you remember, they were both polygraphed and they both supposedly passed. Well, one of the
But we
times that he
know
was,
polygraphs are
it's a touchy subject, because give or take with a grain of salt, basically. But supposedly, when they were polygraphed at the time, supposedly they both had passed. So one of the times that he was questioned, Greene said that Busch was the one who killed Mark Stebbins, the very first victim. So Busch was eventually caught again because he ended up getting charged in 4 different counties and convicted of child molestation. So this was after he was released for his initial, what he was caught for. So once he was caught and convicted of that, that's when everybody else was able to be like, okay, now we can get him for child molestation. So 4 different counties. So one of the children that he was convicted of molesting was a boy named James Vincent Gunnels, who was a teenager at the time. He was one that Greene and Busch molested together. And once he was questioned more, they found that Busch was literally, again, obsessed with boys. Completely obsessed. He told them about all of the places he would be an absolute creep and pick up young boys. 3 of the places that he said that he liked to patrol just so happened to be 3 places where Mark, Jill, and Kristine were all abducted. So he's looking real good.
Set him on fire.
Oh, just wait.
Oh.
Fast forward to 1978.
Okay.
There hasn't been any more killings at this point in time.
Okay.
The task force is still not come any closer to finding out who the Oakland County child killer was at all.
Okay.
There was a ton of suspects, but they were no closer to finding who the killer was. So what's interesting about this is they even considered John Wayne Gacy or even the Unabomber Ted Kaczynski as being suspects for this case. So they pretty much were grasping at all straws, but both of them were very quickly ruled out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know much about the Unabomber, but I know John Wayne Gacy mainly operated like in his house.
Right, exactly.
So,
but when they found out he was not in Michigan at these times anyway, so they were ruled out. So they interviewed a literal ton of people.
oh, I'm sure.
They uncovered a whole ring of pedophiles operating in a location in Detroit called Cass Corridor. Through all the people that they interviewed, they found this whole organized ring of pedophiles. So very, very highly organized. They had like lieutenants and generals. Oh yeah, like
What?
highly organized operation.
Oh my God.
They knew where all the different hangouts were. They knew different houses where certain things would happen. This was not when cell phones were a thing. So they had different ways of communicating with each other. of where things were going to take place, where parties were going to be. Oh, it was ridiculous.
That's so.
Yep. It's
I have no
unreal.
words. I have no words.
Absolutely unreal. So this all happened in in an area in Detroit called Cass Corridor. So some of the boys that were victims of the men, they ended up, as they got older, being the lures for these men for more young boys. So as long as this cool teenager was coming and saying, hey, we got this party going on, there's alcohol, there's cigarettes, you want to come join? And that's how they would get the boys to these parties, and promise of alcohol and marijuana, things like that. So this brings us to November 20th of 1978. The police respond to a welfare check on Chris Busch. He hadn't been heard from in a couple days, and when the cleaning lady couldn't get in, she called his brother, and he was the one that called police.
Also disgusting that he has a cleaning lady.
Right? So when they got into the house, well, I mean, he's loaded. His family's loaded. So
I know. That's why I'm disgusted. That's why I'm disgusted.
I know. So when they got into the house, they found Busch dead on his bed with a gunshot wound to his face with a shotgun next to him. They took pictures of the room and the body, and they showed these crime scene photos in the documentary. So, and I looked up and found some of the crime scene photos as well. So I'll be posting some of those. So the only thing is, though, in the photos, they fully black out his body. So you don't actually see him at all. It's like, and it's not like they even blurred it out to where you see the outlines or anything. It's just this big black box that they just placed right over where his body is. So it kind of covers up some of the other stuff.
Well, they cover up the gruesome stuff for
right, but
that kind of things.
I'm gonna talk about it here in just a second.
Oh.
So, yep. So the place looked very unkempt. I mean, it was a single dude in his 20s who was a piece of shit. So, I mean, it was not tidy at all.
Not to speak ill of the dead, but he was a piece of shit.
However, it was strange. It looked very strange. So they found ropes in his closet, just kind of thrown about. Like, it's
weird.
Not even in a pile, not wound up, just kind of like they were thinner ropes. They weren't like super thick, but it's like somebody took these ropes and just like tossed them in the closet, and they're just there on the floor, nothing else around them. So that was strange. So they also found a drawing that was hung on the wall, just like on a regular piece of paper. So it was what looked like a boy in a hoodie screaming. So, and it's just like this pencil drawing. So it's clearly this, you see a younger boy. He's got a hood up around his head, and he's like mouth open wide, eyes are kind of like scrunched, just mouth open, and that's what the picture is. So just like the head of somebody.
That's really unsettling. I don't like that.
Very unsettling. And like I said, it was a weird scene. So within 24 hours, his death was ruled a suicide.
No.
So they said that he kneeled on the bed with the butt of the gun between his knees and shot. But the thing is, they figured out that the barrel of the gun didn't even touch his forehead. So, and it's a shotgun. So it's this long gun. I don't think the guy was that tall. He was a bigger guy, but he wasn't super tall to be able to finagle kneeling on a bed, which is unsteady anyway, putting a gun in between the butt of the gun in between his knees, and then pointing the barrel up to his face without touching his head, without placing his head on the barrel.
Was the gunshot wound or the wound on his head, did it come from that shotgun?
Yes.
Okay. Because that was going to be my next question, is like, now a shotgun is a lot, to be a little more not as disgusting about it, but it's a lot messier.
It is. Which I'm going to talk about a little bit more. Hold on.
Okay.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
Uh-huh. So they ruled this before the medical examiner's report ever came out. So within 24 hours before the medical examiner's report, police ruled it as a suicide. So what they failed to discover before they saw that report was that he had a blood alcohol level of, wait for it, 0.41 was his blood alcohol level.
Oh. There would have been no way.
How in the, again, what I said, kneeling on a bed is a little unsteady. You're putting the butt of a shotgun in between your knees and shooting without even placing your head on the barrel to steady yourself. Even an alcoholic at 0.41 blood alcohol level, that is huge. You're not able to stand up.
That's like I'm passed out.
Yeah.
Like levels. That's
yes.
you're not functioning. At that level. You're not.
How can you balance a shotgun between your knees without touching the barrel to your forehead to begin with? And I have good balance, but even me kneeling and like walking on my knees on a bed, it's unsteady, you know, especially if you're trying to put something in between your knees and trying to hold it there, you're a little unsteady. So trying to do that when you're
in the 70s. In the 70s, let's face it, they're all box springs and like spring mattresses. So it's even more unstable.
Yeah, exactly. So here's the other thing. He didn't have any gunshot residue on him.
On his hand?
On his hands. No gunshot residue. Oh, and actually, sorry, I take it back. Upon examination of the gun, there was nothing on it. There was no blood. There was no brain matter. There was nothing. Nothing as far as what should be on a gun if you shoot somebody in the head at close range.
Okay.
No, like I said, no brain matter, no blood, nothing.
Yeah.
So the other thing is when you look at the picture, you don't see any blood spatter. There's no brain matter. There's no tissue or anything found near the body. There's nothing. So how he was found on the right side of the bed. Like if you're just looking at the bed, he was found on the right side, laying down on his side, facing the other side of the bed. So not facing away, he was facing the other side of the bed. So it's like they think that he was on his knees and then just fell over to his right side. And the gun was found, I guess, angled towards his head, laying on the other side of the bed. That's how he and the gun were found.
No.
Yeah. Nope. So
you said that little boy saw someone in a police uniform, correct?
The 9-year-old that called the hotline?
Yes.
Yes. He saw somebody talking to Kristine Mihelich, who was in a police uniform, and drove away with her, not in a cop car. So that was another thing that the police were trying to figure out, because they think that all the kids went with somebody willingly. So it's like, were they saying they were a teacher? Were they dressed as a priest, a policeman?
Someone that
in authority?
A child would have trusted.
Exactly. Yeah. So the police said that the drawing on the wall looked like Mark Stebbins, who was the very first victim. And they said looked like what he was possibly last seen in.
Do you have a picture of it?
Which was a hoodie. Yeah. Yep. You can honestly search it and find the picture. If you're going to look at it right now, just type in Chris Busch picture on the wall. Yeah, you'll find it.
Oh my God. Oh, I don't like that at all.
Yeah, it's bad.
And it's the drawing that's on like the left-hand side of the room, correct?
It's in a random place on the wall too. It's like right by the door frame.
It's like in between those two doors.
Yeah.
Also, I'm seeing the way that he is positioned on the bed with the gun. That looks placed.
Yeah, it does. You don't see any blood anywhere either.
No.
Anywhere.
I mean, it's a disheveled room because, yeah, no.
Yep.
No.
So anyway.
He was killed elsewhere.
So
That's my theory.
Yeah. So the police think that the drawing looks like Mark Stebbins and what he was last seen in, because he was wearing some kind of hoodie when he was abducted. So they never found a suicide note, and his
he didn't commit
brother said he was supposed to start a new job in 4 days after he was found, and he was actually like really excited about this new job. I don't know what it was, but he was really excited about it. So his brother's like, this doesn't make sense.
Because he didn't commit suicide.
That's my theory.
Yep.
Only 25 days after Chris Busch was discovered, the Oakland County Child Killer Task Force shut down, supposedly due to loss of funds. They had nobody in custody and had no official suspect, and they never followed up on the Busch lead. It shut down 20 months after Tim King was found.
Are you fucking kidding me?
I wish I was.
Wow.
Yep. Literally 25 days after Chris Busch was found. So now I'm going to take another turn, and I'm going to talk about Gerald Richards. Mr. Richards was a magician and amateur photographer before.
I already don't like this.
Nope. This was before becoming a Catholic school gym teacher.
Now I hate it even more.
Yep. You should. So what the school didn't know was that Mr. Richards was a pedophile who was part of the North Fox Island operation with Francis Sheldon.
Oh my God.
So we're going way back. We're going back to the beginning of episode 1. Yep.
Okay.
They interviewed a couple of men on the docuseries that I watched. They interviewed a couple of men who had him as a gym teacher.
I love how they just background checks just weren't a thing, apparently.
Well, and he had a clear background. He was a family man. He had a wife and kids. So I mean, nobody,
that don't mean a damn thing.
Nobody suspected this of him. So the men that they had interviewed, so they said that he didn't really seem like a gym teacher because he was actually pretty slim and kind of goofy looking, but they thought he was kind of cool because he kind of did magic tricks sometimes, and whatever, he was kind of that cool guy, but he was a goofy looking, skinny, short dude. So even though they were never made to shower by any other gym teacher that they had, he made them shower, saying that they needed to be fresh for the next classes. So even though they didn't need to before, now that Mr. Richards is their teacher, boys, you got to shower. And he'd be in there with them like a fucking creep.
He'd be in the showers with them?
Yeah, he'd be in the locker rooms in the shower. He'd be in the locker rooms there making sure they all showered. Yeah. Yep. So as a gift or a prize or whatever, he would take some of his quote unquote best students on a trip to North Fox Island. He had introduced the boys to Sheldon, Francis Sheldon, Mr. Frank Sheldon, douchebag that never got caught. He would introduce the boys to Sheldon, saying that Sheldon was his uncle.
No.
Yep. Richards lured in a boy named Michael Farquhar. So he continued to go to the island with Richards as his quote unquote assistant, and would continuously be prostituted out to other men, as well as posing for them for money. It was also discovered that absolutely awful. It was also discovered that there was a magazine that was circulating among the pedophile community called Better Life. It said that it was a magazine for quote unquote boy lovers.
Set them on fire.
Yep. And
question. Did they go through a publishing company?
I don't know about that.
Because if so, set them on fire too.
Yep. But you could also order child pornography from this magazine.
That should,
Sheldon would circulate his child pornography through this magazine. So I don't know if it was just circulated around this area that we're talking about, around Cass Corridor and that, but yeah, Sheldon sold a lot of his shit through there. So this was actually the beginning of how the North Fox Island was shut down. It was through basically kind of through this magazine and finding out about Richards.
Is that island still there?
Yeah, it's still there.
They didn't sink it.
No, they didn't.
Damn it.
I know. Because there's a North Fox Island, there's a South Fox Island. I think North Fox is the smaller one, I believe. Because they're right close to each other. So the police questioned Michael Farquhar, about the two men, and he came out and he told them everything.
Good.
So, but however, when the police left, Michael called Richards and warned him what had happened, and Richards was able to warn Sheldon,
and that's how he got away.
Sheldon fled, but Sheldon was actually, he was a smart dude. He had already had a tip that he was about to be discovered. So by the time Richards called him, he already knew. So he was already preparing to get out. So, yeah. So since he was filthy rich, he was able to escape Amsterdam and evade police. But Richards was not so lucky. Thank goodness.
Good.
So he was arrested in 1975. So this was before the killings. So he was arrested in 1975, and he was sentenced for the molestation of a 10-year-old boy and for child pornography, to which he pled guilty. There was no trial. He just guilty. Yep, did it. But he was offered a lesser sentence if he would give up his clientele list, and he did.
Well, of course.
Yep. So
what lesser sentence?
Because of this, he was sentenced to only 2 to 10 years in prison.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Nope. But among the very, very long list of men that he would sell to and who would visit the island was none other than Christopher fucking Busch.
Mm-hmm.
He was on his list. So he was on that list when he gave that to them, and wasn't looked at as a suspect until after Kristine Mihelich, victim number 3. So we just keep going back to Busch. Fast forward to 2005.
I don't like that.
A new task force forms to figure out who the Oakland County child killer is or was. So they're tracking down new leads, and they're going back over old leads. They're just raking through everything. There's a shit ton of boxes of evidence of everything. So they're just pouring over it. And actually, one of the lead men in it, his dad was on the task force back in the 70s.
Originally. Oh.
Yeah. So, and he was a teenager when this was happening. So he remembers his dad being on that task force, and I think he was like 16 or 17 when this was happening.
So he definitely has like a personal kind of connection to it.
Yeah. So he's one of the lead people in this new task force.
Mm-hmm.
So they found things that should have been followed up on that weren't, and things that a ton of money and manpower that were spent on shouldn't have been. One of those things that was a wild goose chase was the blue gremlin. Obviously, nothing ever came of it.
Yeah.
And it was also found out that the woman who supposedly saw this man that they got this actual sketch from,
Yeah.
when she saw, they said she told the police that she saw this man talking to Tim, and he was just next to a blue gremlin. Wasn't actually saying that that was his car. They
Yeah,
just
he wasn't
happened.
in it. He
He
just
just
happened to be
happened to be
next to it.
standing next to a blue
Oh,
gremlin with white racing stripes.
that's so
Yep.
infuriating.
The reason why they're now saying that was a complete wild goose chase is because somebody had come forward and said that blue gremlin was still there the next day after his disappearance.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was, they now think that that was just complete waste of time and everybody's time and money.
Yeah.
So the police now, they instead think that the Pontiac lead should have been followed up because Pontiacs were mentioned in 2 of the crime scenes. The both of the girls, both Jill and Kristine. So they interviewed a man by the name of Richard Lawson, who was a known pedophile from Detroit that was helping, and I say that in heavy quotations, the police back in the 70s with this case. And he was part of the Cass Corridor pedophile ring. So honestly, though, to me, it kind of sounded like the guy just really liked to be in the spotlight. I saw some quotes from him, and they talked about him a little bit in the docuseries, but that's kind of what it seemed like for me. He was he was definitely a name dropper. One of the guys that he named was, they called him Bad-Eyed Bob. Dude has some crazy eyes. Like,
oh, really?
Like crossed type of, yeah, his mugshot is that you understand why they call him Bad-Eyed Bob. So his real name was Bob Moore, and he filmed child pornography and would give it to Francis Sheldon to sell.
Oh my God.
Yep.
That's so disgusting.
Yep.
These are the most vile fucking people.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So another man that Richard Lawson named was Ted Orr is what he said. Okay. So he said that was the name that he actually went by, but he didn't know his real last name. He just knew his name was Ted. He said his last name was Orr. So the cops on the new task force, they went through all of the old information. They ended up finding out that his name was actually Ted Lamborghini. So when the police questioned him, he had admitted to being a pedophile. And I'm talking, they questioned him now, or 2005.
Okay.
The new task force. So he admitted to being a pedophile and that he had victims back in the 70s, some as young as 7 or 8. So yeah, he's a real great guy. Not.
I think you mean piece of shit.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay.
The weird thing about him was he was a total clean freak. He kept a spotless house. And he didn't even actually have any food in his house, which was strange. But like his house was spotless. So his victims, he said he would make the boys take a shower afterward to wash off any of the evidence that was left on them.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So that goes back, because all of the victims were clean.
Showered and bathed.
Yep. Clothes were clean, the whole 9. So even though he gave all of the information of how much of a fucking creep that he was, he denied knowing anything about the murders. But he took a polygraph. He failed that. So they ended up charging him with 17 counts of child molestation. Because up to this point, he hadn't been charged. He had been roaming free. Up to this point.
So there was no statute of limitations, because I was thinking about it in my head, because I'm like, okay, I know the laws have changed recently, but I know within the last like 20 years there was a statute on limitations on certain things, as like child molestation, I think like rape and other things of sexual assault in nature.
Mm-hmm.
I know those had statute of limitations on it, but there's no statute of limitation on murder. So
There
I'm like,
isn't.
yeah, so that's what I'm saying. That's what I was thinking about in my head. I'm like, okay, so then that makes me believe him, because it's like, why admit to all this other horrible shit and then
Mm-hmm.
be like, but I don't know anything about the murders. But then I'm like, wait, statute of limitations on sexual assault, but not murder. Okay, fuck this guy.
Yeah, no. So they did end up charging him with 17 counts of
Good.
child molestation.
Good.
So they tried to do this with him as well. They offered him a deal. So the deal was, if he were to pass a polygraph test about the murders, they would only give him a 10-year sentence for all 17 counts.
I don't
So
like that.
all he had to do.
How
so
old is he
he'd
by
already,
now?
I think he was in his 60s or 70s, I think.
Okay.
But like I said, he had already taken a polygraph and failed it. So once they charged him with all 17 counts, they were like, dude, if you take a polygraph and if you pass it about the murders, it's 10 years. Done. That's it. You're in and out. Instead, he pled straight up guilty on all 17 counts and received life in prison. He is still there to this day.
Yep.
So yeah, he was like, nope, no deal. I'm guilty. Spend the rest of my life in prison. Yeah, so he's still there currently. So they had polygraph experts look at the polygraph tests that both Busch and Greene had taken back in the 70s when they were arrested. So these polygraph experts that they had look at Busch and Greene's polygraph tests, they've had like 30 years of experience reading the polygraph.
Right.
They all said they don't know how they passed them because they actually failed them. So not sure how polygraph experts back then said that they passed, because they definitely didn't. So that's comforting.
Yeah.
So in 2009, when going through all of the old evidence, they found something that was actually marked debris that they had taken from a suspect's car in Mark's murder. This was Arch Sloan, who was a suspect in Mark's murder, and he had failed a polygraph about Tim's death. So he was also one that they had looked at through all 4 murders. Because, so again, he took a polygraph after Tim's death, failed that one. So they still have all of his evidence that they had taken from his stuff. So they're retesting all of the evidence they have, because obviously there's a thing called DNA nowadays that they didn't have back then, because, nobody had DNA back then.
No, it's just a new thing that people have.
It's this new thing. It's this new cool thing.
All the kids are doing it.
They actually found that the debris was actually hair, but it wasn't Sloan's hair. So they had pulled this from Sloan's car, but it turned out not being his hair. They did find that the hair matched hairs found on both Mark Stebbins and Tim King. So the
hair?
Yep. This is when they realized that Tim and the hair that they found on Tim and Mark matched, and that those hairs matched this one hair that they found in Arch Sloan's car. It just doesn't belong to Arch Sloan. They weren't saying this yet, but that's when they found this.
Okay.
So they also found that same DNA that matched some saliva DNA that was found on Kristine's jacket. So while
there was saliva DNA found on her
her jacket. Yep. So while they didn't find hair, it was saliva, and that DNA matched the hairs. Yeah. So they questioned Sloan again, who was in prison, but this time he was serving a life sentence for raping one of his co-workers' 10-year-old sons back however long ago. Yep. Okay. So he admitted that he had had a camper at the time of the murders, but he said that he had sold his Pontiac Bonneville to the son of a state trooper back then. But when they tried to look further into that, nobody can remember anything about that, and that man was excluded from the suspect list. So the person who said that he saw Kristine leave the 7-Eleven with a police officer, going back to that dude again.
Mm-hmm.
So even though he tried to call the tip line, he told his teacher about it. Nobody believed him. He said that after Tim King's death, cops came to school to question him. And they told him, you didn't see that, and told him to forget what he saw. So
I had a feeling that
Mhm.
something of this nature was going on. Okay.
However, the new task force isn't taking much stock into what he has to say either, though, because he said that the store clerk didn't mention a police officer there, and someone else said they saw Kristine walk out of the parking lot. So, there's conflicting stories as far as who saw Kristine and where they saw her leave from. Store clerk said they didn't see any police officers, but she definitely came in and bought a magazine. Somebody else had said they saw Kristine leave the parking lot. This boy said no, she left with a police officer. So it's kind of
Ugh.
it's just aggravating. It is so aggravating
Yeah.
because you don't
Okay.
know. But if you remember, Kristine's grandfather was on the original task force.
Yeah.
So the girls were not molested. The boys were. Was Kristine taken as a warning? Don't know. I mean, you don't know. She was held for 19 days.
Yeah.
So it's
But then nothing, as far as we know, but then nothing came out of that. Like,
I
she
know.
was held, but nothing was like, hey, don't fuck around. You're messing in something that you shouldn't be. It was nothing. They just took her and then killed her.
Yep.
Was that the warning?
I don't know. So it's something else to think about as far as why were there 2 boys and 2 girls and only the boys were molested? Why was Jill shot instead of asphyxiated just like the other 3? So, I mean, there's just a million questions. So, the other thing that they think too, that it could have been more than just one person. Because if you think
Oh,
about
for
it,
sure.
you're holding these children for multiple days, anywhere from 4 to 19 days. So you'd have to be on them 24/7. And if you're somebody that has, one of these shit bags that does this on the side and holds a regular job, you can't just not go to your job. So you'd have to have people doing watches and shit like that. So that's why they had asked Arch Sloan, and he admitted that he had a camper at this point in time, because then they're thinking, okay, were they kept in their home, were they kept in something like a camper, things like that. So they ended up finally finding a match to that hair in 2009. So taking you back, it matched James Vincent Gunnels. If you remember right from episode 1, he was one of the victims of Greene and Busch. He was the one that they thought maybe ended up helping them lure boys after he was one of their victims. So he was 15 or 16 at the time of the murders.
Yeah.
So by 2009, he actually had racked up quite a record for himself, and he was currently in prison. So his history, though, was property damage, drug crimes, and things along that nature. He never had any sexual
Nothing
abuse
particularly
charges.
like violent or sexual.
Right, just some property
Okay.
damage. Like I'm saying, like just some property damage and drug charges. But that's the type of thing that he was in prison for. That's what
Okay.
his rap sheet showed. So no sexual abuse charges. So again, police think that he ended up maybe have been a lure for Greene and Busch.
Oh, I'm sure.
His DNA was in both of their cars. So he was questioned about the match, and he admitted to being in their cars, but didn't know how his DNA ended up on Kristine's jacket. So he denied any knowledge about the murders, naturally. Gunnels takes a polygraph test, and the officers told him that if he were to take a polygraph test and pass, he would be cleared as a witness and a suspect and immediately paroled from what he's serving currently. So they tried it on him too. Dude, if you take polygraph and you pass it, you're cleared. You're cleared. We won't talk to you anymore. And we're getting you out of prison. So they showed a picture of his results on the documentary that I watched. And there was a little paragraph on there that says it was inconclusive because, in quote, Gunnels purposely skewed the examination by holding his breath, fidgeting, and tightening body muscles. Gunnels later confessed to purposely throwing the polygraph. End quote. Why would you throw it? I mean, literally, if you truly don't know anything and you pass the polygraph, they're letting you out of prison.
Well, here's the thing. Okay. So with things of this nature, where it's so organized and everything, you have some very powerful people that are involved.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they've already showed that they are not afraid to kill children.
Nope.
And I truly believe that they definitely killed Chris Busch for some reason.
Somebody did.
So for some reason. And here's the thing. If he were to ever name names like that, he would be safer in prison than outside, quite frankly.
I mean, yeah.
And not to mention, again, a lot of these people are probably very powerful, and they could be like, okay, well, now he has to go as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So the thing is, he took a second polygraph, and this time the results said, quote, completely failed all aspects of the examination. So he also admitted being in Sloane's car several times as well, which is why his hair was in that car. But he continued to deny that he was involved in the murders at all. But the thing is, Gunnels was a mitochondrial match to those hairs, and they explain this more in the documentary, but basically what that means is it was either him or a relative on his mother's side. So the mitochondrial matches has everything to do with the women on that side of the family. So,
Okay.
like I said, literally either him or somebody on his mom's side of the family. That's how close of a match they got. So in 2012, so fast forward a few more years, the state's attorney at the time held a press conference saying that the mystery hair wasn't Arch Sloane's hair, so they weren't going forward with that lead. She also discredited the Chris Busch lead because she couldn't convict a dead man. The investigators were pissed because they did not want any of that information.
Who is this woman?
She's the state's attorney at the time.
She needs to keep her mouth shut.
Yeah. The investigators were pissed because clearly they didn't want that getting out because Arch Sloane was complying with them. He was answering questions and everything like that. So, like I said, they hadn't told Sloane that he wasn't a match.
This is the kind of stuff that they keep like close to their chest and like, okay, we're going to play these cards when we feel that they're necessary.
Yeah, because like I said, Arch Sloane was complying with them.
Yeah.
After that press conference, after she said that,
he wasn't
was unwilling to cooperate any further. They got nothing else from him. Yeah.
Why did she do that?
I don't know. I have no idea. But she held a frickin' press conference saying that Arch Sloane wasn't a match, and I'm not going forward with Chris Busch because I can't convict a dead man.
Yep. Wow.
So Greene actually died in prison in 1995. His cellmate, who was actually ended up saying that they were lovers, apparently, he said that Greene told him all of the children that he and Busch had molested and gotten away with, and the ones that he was convicted for. So he said Greene laid it all out on the table. He told him all of the kids, where they were, what they did. He told them everything. So the cellmate even said that Greene was quoted as saying, We even killed 4 of them and got away with it. He didn't name names, but he laid it all out and said, we even killed 4 of them, got away with it. Yep. So someone who had played hockey with Tim King was working at a clothing store in the early 90s, and a cop had come into the shop there. So he had asked the cop, hey, where are you at with the investigation with Tim King? I mean, this is the 90s, so this is 20 years later, but
Yeah.
I mean, clearly this kid remembered because he played hockey with Tim.
Well, obviously.
So the guy said, don't worry, it's solved. The guy who did it was the son of a wealthy executive of GM. It wasn't solved at that point in time.
No.
Clearly, none of them are solved at this point in time. But supposedly, that is what this cop said when he came into this clothing store.
Don't do that.
Nope.
Don't do that.
So, unfortunately, they are no closer to finding the killer or the killers, whichever it is. I think there's multiple. I think there was multiple involved.
Oh, absolutely.
They're no closer to finding them today than they were back then. Although this new task force is still actively working on the case. So a few things that I really do think need to be mentioned. The officers think that maybe this was a team killing, like I said, simply because kids were kept anywhere from 4 to 19 days, and takes some serious time, obviously, to accomplish that. Another thing that might be noted is, why were Jill and Kristine taken and killed? Both Mark and Tim, they were sexually molested, but the girls weren't. So some think that the girls may have actually been taken by mistake, and they were kept for so long basically just to figure out what to do with them, and then eventually killed because they saw their captors, because back in the 70s, young boys wore their hair a little longer. And that added with kids being taken during Michigan winter, everybody was all bundled up, possibly made it harder to decipher between the boys and the girls.
Oh, yeah.
And, one of the girls had just had their hair chopped off before she was abducted. So, I mean, and you see, you see pictures of young boys in the 70s, 60s and 70s are starting to wear their hair longer.
The shaggy hair. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, maybe the girls were taken by mistake. I don't know. I mean, you just don't know, because if this was truly a child molester who favored boys that took the kids and killed them, maybe the girls were taken by mistake.
Yeah, because typically people of that nature will have like a preference, like of one of the other.
Exactly.
Like, of course I'm not saying that there aren't cases where they attack both, because there certainly are, but typically pedophiles will have a preference.
Right. Exactly. So that's just kind of an aside there. That's just kind of one of those things that's got to be brought up, I think.
Question.
Yes.
Did Greene's cellmate / boyfriend get any kind of like time off or something to sweeten the pot of him telling them this information?
No.
He didn't get anything.
No. Nope. He just talked basically after Greene died. It was after Greene's death. That's when he came forward with, hey, he did tell me all of the kids that he got away with and were convicted for. This is where it happened. And do we
know what he was in prison for?
No, he was just mentioned. He was just mentioned as his cellmate. So
okay, well, because now if he came forward and was like, hey, I have information, give me a little something if you want it. Now, I'm more inclined to believe him if he came forward and was like, I don't want anything, I just want to tell you what was told to me. Like, I'm more inclined to believe a person, because I'm not saying that if you're in prison that you're a liar. I'm just saying that sometimes when a prisoner comes forward, you have to take it with a grain of salt, because normally they come forward and the police are giving them something in order to get information out of him. So I'm more inclined to believe him since he didn't get anything out of this.
Yeah, no. It hasn't been mentioned anywhere that I saw that he got something out of it. So he just came forward. It was after I'm thinking it was the newer task force that had interviewed him. He didn't start till 2005 is when they were formed. So yeah.
Well, regardless, I'm glad he came forward and told somebody about it.
But now both Chris Busch and Gregory Greene, they're both dead now. So you can't get any more information from those two men.
You can get their DNA.
That's all you can get.
It's sometimes enough.
Yeah. But there hasn't been any DNA that has linked Busch or Greene to any of the murders.
I know.
Although,
and okay, the kid that was involved with them, the young
Gunnels.
kid, so
Gunnels.
was he interviewed after Greene had passed?
Yeah.
And he still won't talk? What the fuck?
I know. I'm telling you.
Ugh.
He
though,
continued to deny it and doesn't know. He said, yes, I was in their cars. Yes, I was in Sloane's car. Because, yes, I was a victim of all three of them. However, I don't know how my DNA got on the kids. I don't know anything. And he threw one polygraph test and failed the other one. So, just as a side note, North Fox Island is now owned by the state. So there's your answer about North Fox Island. I don't know.
What is it?
I don't know. The state owns it. The buildings are still there. I probably would have burned it down, but still there.
I would have sunk that island.
Yeah, I would have definitely wanted to tear down all the buildings first and foremost.
Well, here's the thing. Keep them up for the sake of this task force.
Well, yeah.
Keep them preserved. And then once they get everything they need out of them, let it go into the Great Lakes and just sink the whole damn island.
Well, and the problem is they don't even know for sure if
those are even connected with
linked, to the murders. They don't even know that for sure.
Well, the thing is, I'm sure they're linked to it in some capacity. Maybe the children hadn't gone to that island. Maybe they had. I don't know.
I don't think they had. I think what it was, though, I think that
these men were connected to the men that were connected to this island. I'm sure that's how it is connected.
Yeah.
So disgusting.
Seriously, it was like one of those things where you want to get a whole wall and start putting pictures and maps on it and then connecting all of the dots, because it was just this whole nasty web of shit bags doing awful things.
Right, dealing with like the lowest form of human possible.
And I did see that Tim King's dad, like I said, the Kings have been the most active, and Tim King's mom passed away quite a few years ago. But his dad, on the other hand, he was an attorney, and he like actively tried to get any information he could. He filled out so many different Freedom of Information Acts to get all of the evidence that he possibly could. He and the state's attorney that I mentioned in 2012, they did not jive, because he thought that
she fucked it up.
Yeah, he thought that she was withholding information and didn't give him everything. So I
believe it.
In the docuseries, you definitely, and this is awful, you hear the interviewer ask his dad, you hear them ask him, do you think it's too late? Do you think that this will get solved? Do you think it's too late? And he goes, well, I know it is for me. I'm in my 80s now, not in great health, so I know it is for me, but I hope that eventually they'll catch him. I know. I know. And the worst part about that, I found that he passed away last year.
Oh my God.
Yep. Yep. So Tim King, it's his 4 siblings that have now taken over for their dad. Yeah, because his siblings, I believe they are in their, let's see,
Like 50s, 60s?
yeah, I'm thinking 60s ish, because Tim, I think, was the youngest. So,
Oh, okay.
and he was 12, I believe, at the time. So 10 to 12. So yeah, so I think they're probably in their 60s ish now. So that is the Oakland County child killer case that is still unsolved, but still actively being investigated.
I hope we get
Something, literally something.
just a little something to point in a direction.
I know.
Or maybe a deathbed confession or something.
I
Something.
don't know. Yeah, because I
Or
mean,
like actual like DNA that points to a specific person or something of that nature. Or one of these fucking people hopefully grows a conscience and actually comes forward and is like, here's what happened. Like, I'm sorry, some of these people are already spending life in prison. Why
know.
not? Why?
Mm-hmm. Yep. Like, do I think that Sheldon Cooper was involved in the murders? I don't. Do I think that Gerald Richards was involved in the murders? I don't. I think he's just this Weasley little man who just
Took advantage of
took
children.
advantage. So and he was in prison at the time anyway. So I don't think that he was involved in these murders. It was just awful fishy that we found Chris Busch on his list of clientele that would get child pornography and, you know, all of that and visit the island. So I really think that Busch and Greene looked very good for these, and there was just so much, unfortunately, circumstantial evidence
Yeah.
around Busch especially. So I don't know.
Well, the thing is, like, I'm sure. So Greene was already in serving life in prison when Chris Busch was killed, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I think obviously Greene and Busch look really good for this, and maybe a third was involved,
Mm-hmm.
maybe with the watching of the children when they
Right.
were gone.
Maybe not necessarily the actual murder part.
Yeah, maybe not necessarily the actual murder, but as far as like maybe disposing of the bodies, maybe the watching the children while the two men had to be at work or something. I'm sure that other gentleman that you spoke about that threw the polygraph, I'm sure that he knows. I'm 100% sure that he knows way more than what he's admitting to.
And do I think he was involved in it? No. However, but he
The
was
murders
involved.
probably not.
He was involved in that whole cast corridor because he was a victim himself, and the police suspect he was a lure. They don't know for sure, but they suspect he was. I think Sloan looks very good as well. Arch Sloan. He had a Pontiac at the time.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, people can get a car wrong here and there. However, there was Pontiac mentioned in 2 different cases, in the 2 girls' cases. DNA that was in his car matched DNA on 3 of the victims. So, I don't know.
Well, I think these 4 men look good as to being involved in these murders. The other ones that were at that island that needs to be sunk into the depths of hell, I don't think they were involved in these cases.
No, not in these 2.
It's just obviously like a very big coincidence that they're actually very close to one another in proximity, and maybe these men all knew one another.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that they were necessarily involved in the murders of these children.
Ted Lamborghini, though, too, he was the one that ended up just pleading guilty to 17 counts of child molestation for life in prison rather than taking another polygraph.
Oh yeah, because
I think
well, that's
he
the
knew
thing. I'm
something
sure
as
he
well.
knew something.
Yeah.
Maybe not have been involved, but probably knew something.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and there were other people mentioned in the documentaries as well. They just focused a lot on these particular men. Is what they focused a lot on. So it's just awful. It's not, none of it's any good at all. It's awful, and I hate it, and I hate all people. I mean, this is one of those cases that you have no faith in humanity whatsoever, because you just find out people are awful.
I know, and that's also one of the reasons why I wanted to do like a true crime podcast, because here's the thing. Monsters are real, and they're actually people.
Yeah.
It's not the boogeyman, it's not a monster hiding in your closet, it's not ghosts or goblins or anything. It's people. People can be the most horrific creatures on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the kind of stuff where I'm like, I want to get this kind of information out there and just let people know and be aware of it, even if you're not a fan of like true crime and like just knowing things. That this is the kind of stuff that people need to know about.
Yeah.
This stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no matter how ugly it is, no matter how ugly it gets, you need to know about it.
Yeah. Because you need to keep yourself safe. You need to keep your family members safe. You need to keep your kids safe. Shit, you even need to keep your dog safe. Like, you just stay safe.
Yeah.
So
be aware, and if you see something, say something, and if you know something, say something.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, seriously.
And my God, just like be a human. Just be a fucking human. Have a little bit of humanity and just ugh.
I know.
I'm so upset.
It's because it's awful.
It is. I know.
If you're not upset after hearing both of those episodes, I don't want to say anything because it needs to upset you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's another reason why I hate unsolved things, because again, I feel like I took a big breath and now I can't exhale.
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. No, you're not. But I'm glad we did this. I'm glad we did this one.
Maybe my next one will be solved. I don't know. I can't decide.
No, it won't.
I haven't decided what I'm doing yet. I don't know.
Okay. So you can follow us on Facebook at
2K away.
And you can follow us on Instagram at 2K Away Podcast. We do have a Gmail that you can contact us with. It's 2kawaypodcast@gmail.com. We have a YouTube channel, 2K Away Podcast. And every time you do the word 2, it's the number 2. And if you can give us a little rate and review on Apple Podcasts. I don't know if any other podcast apps that have like where you can rate, but I know Apple for sure. I don't know. That's where I listen to mine. But give us a little review. Give us some stars. We'd really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody that continues to listen to us. We really appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us on this horrible journey that we just took for 2 weeks.
Yeah, sorry.
That's over now. We're going to move on.
Yeah, we did this back to back, and now I need to go hug my piggies.
Yeah, and go cry a little bit.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see you all next week for my next case. And I don't think it's going to be any happier.
Oh, good.
Yeah. It's going to be rough too. Sorry.
Have you already decided?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also pretty rough, but mine's going to be in one episode.
Okay.
Yeah. We're not going to spread it out.
Well, then maybe my next one will be a little breezier. It probably won't be.
Whoa.
I'm sorry.
No. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Alrighty, yeah. So that's kind of what we're doing. We're gonna rip your heart out for a couple weeks, and then maybe like the next week is gonna be a little lighter, and then we're just gonna go back to ripping out your heart.
Sorry.
All right. Well, we will see you all next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey everyone, we just want to say before we go that if you have a tip about this case, you can contact the Michigan State Police at 855-642-4847. Again, that's 855-642-4847. If you know something, say something.